Welcome to the Open Design Guide call number, I'll have to look that up. It is number 8, and we're talking about chapter 7. Last week was a live stream, which sounded like it was pretty cool. I watched the recording of it. I will share the notes here again as usual. I'll give everyone edit rights, share that. I'll take the edit rights again after the call so we can broadly share it. So feel free to take notes in there. I wanted to point out a couple of things. I merged 4 pull requests. One of them was very basic, just for like when you share the link that there's an image that actually pops up and our fave icon works. So kind of just the social sharing stuff. Then chapters 2, 3, and 4 were updated based on the notes. And something to think about while editing, while we discuss content, is that we now have these little blue pills in, I don't know if you can see them very well, but they're like these little blue pills. They're a type of link that looks unique, and that is like cross-referencing other chapter. So let's say here we mentioned UX research. If we have a chapter about research somewhere else, we can link to it, right?
Yeah.
And it's small, like it's subtle, right? So we don't have to plaster all these huge links in somewhere, but we know like, okay, this refers to another chapter. And then we have these view resources things here. I need to make myself a little bit smaller. So that is also another subtle way that we can add links that it doesn't really interrupt the reading flow, right? And then we have these editor's notes here. And I started adding that in after realizing for the 5th time that the case studies that the AI made up are just not very interesting to read. So I was like, let's just get rid of it and put a request for content in here. So we know there's a gap here and that we need to fill instead of having this fake unhelpful data in there. So that's kind of it. So as we read through chapters, that's also something where we can say, well, we should have a resources bubble here or box here or so. And then another thing that I did was I asked the AI again, like, why is this chapter is called contributing design assets, where I'm like, what's the point of this? Do you know from the title, like how this fits in and what it would be about?
Contributing design assets.
Yeah. So if you hear that, what do you expect?
The word asset just feels a little bit off in that opening. I don't know. That's just my first feeling. I'm just saying what I'm thinking straight away.
Yeah.
Contributing design. I don't know. I mean, you call them. I mean, yeah. Design assets to me feel more like, these sort of clip art that you buy. You can buy clip art online. It feels a little bit more to me like the clip art that you can buy.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel quite right.
No.
So I asked AI actually, what's the importance of this chapter. So it said, well, it kind of makes sense. You first learned about, like, it gave me this sequence and it explained that this builds on the previous chapters where you learn the tools, you learn the workflows, you learn the design process, and this one is about how you actually bring all that together
Mm-hmm.
and then share the things that you basically come up with.
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of I'm still not super sold on it,
Okay.
but maybe we can read through it. But I was just curious what your first impression is, because I was not convinced from the title.
Nope.
But should we read anyways?
Sure, let's go.
Um,
One sec before proceeding, please check the recording. I don't think it's enabled yet. And
Really?
it
I
tells
would feel
me
very bad if you have to say everything again that you just said in the
uh,
introduction.
the recording is in progress. I see the little red thing. I
I
can
did
cover it.
not hear Jitsi saying recording has started
Yeah,
or the icon, the red dot icon.
looks good on my
But
side.
okay, okay.
Let's trust
That's
that.
mm,
Yeah, thanks for checking. Okay, I can start reading. since I wasn't here last week. All right, why design assets matter. Design assets are the visual building blocks of open source projects. They help make the software look good and easy to use. Really? I don't know about the easy to use. These assets can be things like the buttons you click, the icons you see, or even the overall look of the app. As a designer, your job is to create these pieces and help make the software more user friendly and attractive. In open source, design is a team effort. The assets you create might be changed or improved by others later. This is different from traditional design work, where your designs might be set in stone. Here, it's more like starting a conversation with your designs.
Hmm. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
It's weird, right? For me, I don't know if these visual building blocks, if they make the software easy to use, I guess in some way, but that's really more interaction design. I guess I'm really not clear, like what is it that I'm actually sharing here? I mean, okay, the buttons, the icons. It's I'm not really clear yet on what it is,
I
and then it's more like starting a conversation. Now, I don't know. What do you think?
I guess it's kind of going towards like a design system kind of thing,
Yeah.
where it's just telling ki if you are a contributor, this is why or how you should structure your system when contributing, so that anyone who comes into the project later on in the as the project is going on, they can also jump in without having to um, what do you call.
Redo things
Yeah.
or start from scratch?
So yeah, the assets thing again. Yeah, for me also it was like, am I creating some clip arts or SVGs or what? But
Yeah.
yeah, reading the description, I guess makes sense. Ki you are like telling people that there is the iterative design process that is there in open source, and when you're contributing to it, you should have a certain standard of systems with you to. When I scroll through the page, it says like this: ki how to share mockups, how to create illustrations and icons. So I guess that's what.
Yeah. Right. That's where it gets interesting because the second sentence or the third one says buttons you click, icons you see, and then it talks about sharing mockups and prototypes, which to me
It's
feels like it's a
it's
little bit
not
different.
yeah, it's not coherent, but
Yeah. Okay.
I
Let's.
guess
Yeah. Go
yeah,
for
yeah,
it.
good.
I guess we'll keep reading and then maybe see how we can piece it together.
Yeah, probably we'll have to come back to the top and decide what this page is all about, and then have this conversation.
Hmm.
What to have, what not.
All right. Would you like to take over, or one of you?
Uh, I can read, yeah, creating icons, creating and sharing mockups. So, creating and sharing mockups and prototypes. Mockups and prototypes are like rough drafts of your design ideas. They help everyone understand what you're thinking before any real coding happens. Here's how you can approach this. First, start simple. Use design assets like balsamic or even pen and paper to sketch your ideas quickly. These rough designs are great for getting early feedback from the community. As you refine your ideas, make more detailed mockups. These should show the real colors, fonts, layouts you're proposing. Design assets like Figma or Sketch are great for this. Remember to think about any technical limits the project might have. For designs with lots of interaction, try making a clickable prototype. This lets people experience your design idea as if it were real. Design assets like InVision or even simple web pages can work well for this. When you share your mockups or prototypes, explain what problem you're trying to solve and how your design helps. Be ready to answer questions and make changes based on what other things. This is, I mean, if you call yourself a designer, I don't think like this info needs to be recommunicated exactly like how it's written. That you need to use mockups, you need to be uh, using pen and paper to sketch your ideas like this is no tangible or helpful info to me, even as a new designer. I think so. And then the formatting is there, like the full stops are at weird spaces.
And the weird design dash assets there. I
Yeah,
wonder, I
yeah.
wonder if I even made a mistake copy pasting it or doing some minor edits, but it's kind of weird. Yeah. Okay.
The just a small comment on the formatting of the paragraphs,
All right. I will tell you what's going on. There is
please.
a CSS. So in typography, you often, like when you have a static text or a poster you deal with, you try to shoot for a character count of 60 to 80 characters per line. That is good readability. That
Hmm.
allows your eyes to, when you finish reading one line, that makes it easy for your eye to hop to the next line. If the line is
Okay,
too long, it's hard to hop to the next one, right? If it's
okay,
too short, then you just have to keep hopping between lines. So 60 to 80 characters is a good one. You also try to sometimes manually break lines to avoid single words in a line.
Yeah.
right.
Like so, that's called orphans or widows if
Orphans.
it's like in a
Orphans,
different
right.
medium.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And then you sometimes also, especially for headlines, this is very common. You try to do custom breaks so the edges of the text create a nice shape, and you'll see that here, right? So I enabled a CSS property called text wrap balance or something like that, where it
Okay,
does try to create nicely shaped. It tries to break the sentences or the lines so the edges create a nice shape. So that's it's generally better, but it seems like it is stand out to you a little bit here.
it's very standout. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you either enable or disable that setting. It's usually just used for headlines, but I also enabled it for the body text here as well.
yeah.
Yeah. Actually, let's take a look. Let's disable it and
See what
see what
happens.
happens.
Let us know when we can refresh.
You can't refresh. I just
Oh,
toggled it here in my browser.
okay. Let's have a look. Oh, right.
I can toggle it back and forth. I'm just using the inspect tool.
Mm.
So
I don't know. For me personally, it feels better like this. I don't know what
this
everyone.
one,
yeah. The second one's better.
which one?
This one, this one.
That's where you have the this, for example, on its own line. Yeah, maybe it's a bit too strong. Okay, we can. I can disable it for body text, keep it enabled for headlines.
I think the other one is better though.
Yeah.
Easy readability.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. So what do we do? Okay. Maybe we'll ask someone else too and get a couple more opinions, and then we'll
Sounds good.
decide. Um, Mo, is someone actually taking notes? I forgot to take notes here.
Oh my goodness, I'm absolutely not taking notes.
Okay. So I didn't mean to put it on you. Usually I'm the one who should take
Where
notes.
is the, you've shared it in the chat,
Yeah.
yes?
Um, discuss whether to keep balanced text wrap
And they're heading as well.
body text.
Um,
I like that new setting. I think it's pretty nice, but it can look a bit off in long paragraphs of text. Okay, it's actually a pretty short page. Should we just keep reading then?
sure. Um,
Okay, while
So
you're up catching up with notes, I can read.
sure.
That's that.
one more thing, like before proceeding about the previous part. So it says that we're talking about creating and sharing mockups and prototypes, but it also goes into like this fundamental that you should iterate faster, like iterative design, and ask early on from the community for feedback. And it says you should be aware of what development constraints can be there. So does that sound right to you? Because open source projects, I don't know how it works. Like you have developers, you don't have developers. Uh, because the time when we had the Summer of Bitcoin review call for the projects, the Bitcoin UI gallery was completely ready design wise, but now someone has to take it up to develop it, right? There's no one as of now, or is there?
Not that I'm aware of. I think it
So.
really depends on the project. That is very custom. So some of Bitcoin is a bit unique because the student's there for a certain amount of time and then most likely will do something else. So it has to be kind of self-contained. You cannot just, stop for half a year and do some development, then come back to it. I guess you
Yeah,
could.
yeah.
That depends really on the individuals.
Okay.
And sometimes with very small projects, you don't need like huge,
Okay.
future visions. But then if you have a bigger project where you're trying to decide to do for to do for the next 2 years, then you may need to do like tons of designs ahead of time. So I think it's really depends on what you're trying to do,
Okay.
which does not help make it easier to write some specific text. But I think that's helpful if we actually describe that somewhere too, right?
Yeah. And the part about early feedback and iterative thing. I mean, I was new, so I learned that from Art when we were designing that I used to take like 7 days to do something and then come back, and he was like, no, no, come back in 1 or 2 days. Just keep letting me know like what exactly are you doing, because 7 days is a long time where you, if 1 degree of shift happens between what you're trying to do, what you come back 7 days later is completely different than what we expect. So it was like a huge learning for me as a new designer
Yeah.
in the community. So that can be emphasized a little bit more, or if it has been done in previous pages, then it's good to, no issues. It can be linked back though, if it's there.
Yeah. I mean, that's also good to communicate, right? When you start something, you can just say, well, I'm thinking that I will go away for 7 days and come up with something that's pretty complete because I need the time to do a little bit of research and this and that. And then someone else says, well, I want to make sure that I can give some input because I don't want you to go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe they're like, okay, that sounds great because I'm busy otherwise, anyways. So I think just communicating ahead of time is helps avoid any of these, you know,
Yeah,
bad
yeah.
surprises later. Um,
Cool.
okay, I'll read the next one then.
Yes.
Creating icons, illustrations, and other graphics. Graphics like icons and illustrations can make a project look much better and easier to use. Here are some tips. Keep things consistent. Make sure your designs fit with the project's overall style. If you're creating a set of icons or illustrations, come up with some rules to follow for all of them. Think about different sizes, especially for icons. Make sure they look good when they're big or small. Sometimes you might need to make different versions for different sizes. For illustrations, think about how they might be used in different parts of the project. Creating a set of illustrations that all work together can be really helpful. When it comes to file types, SVG is often best for open source projects. These files can be made bigger or smaller without losing quality, and they're easy for others to change if needed.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's some helpful kind of basic tips for creating. I guess previously here above here, mockups and prototypes. This is where I'm more sharing like UI design and flows. This is just static graphics that could be used on the website or on some, let's say, onboarding flow, um, and some other places. It's just very basic, just a handful of little different bits for to consider.
I feel like what could also maybe be added there is using AI to generate art as well. Um, and I'm like also, did they mention anything about logos?
Could also go in there.
Yeah, let me just make some notes.
So the AI, would you actually put that in tools in the previous page?
Yeah, maybe it fits in better there. Yeah, yeah. And then this is.
I mean, I feel like I'm generally starting to get this whole page. I think design assets just a weird term. I think we just call them artifacts. Like
Mm-hmm.
in the Bitcoin Core app, we created 100 different design mockups, and so it's just any visual output that you have, and it can be final and it can go into the product, which could be an illustration, or maybe it's not final and it's just a sketch or a mock-up. Maybe you have like 50 mock-ups and you ditch half of them, and then you have the final mock-ups. Those are the ones maybe that the developers reference for implementation, or that you then use during QA to compare if it's properly implemented. Or it could be a video where you talk through the designs. It's like all these things that you create basically that are to communicate design, and that will go in the final thing. From that perspective, I think that page kind of makes sense to me. It's your output.
Is there anything about yeah, the organizing? Okay. I didn't scroll down that far. Okay.
Would you like to read that one?
Sure. Organizing and sharing your design files. In open source projects, lots of people might need to use or change your design files. Here's how to keep things organized. Use clear names for your files, something like project X underscore logo underscore v1.2.svg tells exactly what the file is. Put your files in folders that make sense. You might have separate folders for mockups, icons, and illustrations. Include a README file that explains what's in each folder and how to use the files. Use version control if you can. This helps keep track of changes over time. Git can work for this, even though it's usually used for code. Provide your designs in different file types when you can. This makes sure everyone can use them no matter what software they have. Okay. The mention of using Git is something that doesn't quite feel right because I've never heard of anyone using Git to version control in Figma, or maybe, yeah. So just that bit about Git doesn't quite feel right. Um,
I mean, it's the same thing we do with this project, or what you do with. I think you have content on GitHub, right?
oh, GitHub, not Git.
So think Git is like GitHub under the hood uses Git. GitHub is just a nice interface for Git. Git is like the engine that drives it, that moves everything, and
Oh,
GitHub is the car that you get in, that you cruise around with.
so in that case, it might be useful to link to what Git is, and so link what Git is, because when I read the word Git, I wasn't familiar. I didn't even know that there was a connection between Git and GitHub.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we need to make that clear very early on in this whole guide.
I, I
Yeah,
think we have in one of the pages. I think so. The previous page that we read, tools and stuff, even that had like a hyperlink or something for Git.
yeah. But I feel like to this point, I feel like this section needs to step out a little bit further. It needs to be uh, just ask, like, where does your project organize things? Do you have like a site for documentation? Do you have, maybe you have a Dropbox folder, or maybe you have GitHub repo, or maybe you create your own, or maybe you use something
exactly.
else. Maybe the cloud tools like Figma are good enough for you, right? You just store it in someone else's cloud and trust it's going to stick around. Maybe there can be some tips if you're if you're a designer new to a project and you want to start organizing all the designs that are being created. Here's a good way to do it, right? So
Mhm.
because right now it feels like it's not really giving me the bigger picture, and it's not really telling me a good way to go about it. Like how to name my files, like this doesn't even make sense in something like Figma, right? you know So I don't know. It feels I get the purpose of this section, but it doesn't feel as helpful, I think, as it could be.
It doesn't. Yeah, I'm feeling the same. And it's okay if we decide to remove some sections. It's more, I think, about having it relevant.
I think it's a real problem. I think that because when I came in and started doing this open source stuff, I would ask, like, where are the designs? And it's like, I think there's one guy who's not part of the project anymore. 3 years ago, he had some
Has it? Yeah.
Photoshop file somewhere, but no one knows where it is. And then people just use screenshots and annotated them in like Microsoft Paint or so. So I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. So the like keeping your stuff in like a place that's easy to find, like the Bitcoin Core app design docs, or so, have like being able to quickly find the stuff you need is really important.
Yeah.
So it
Do
is
you,
something to address, I think.
do you think maybe a more universal approach can be added here? Like, this is how you should think about when you're trying to organize your design files instead of giving the exact example of Git and README and stuff like that, which might be implemented into other
Yeah,
apps also.
I think there are general tips. It's like it's helpful if your team has a place where all the designs are found. It doesn't matter what the
Yeah.
place
This
is
is
at the
yeah.
beginning, right? But just have one, and have one that cannot just disappear overnight because some company goes out of business or they change their
Yeah.
policy or so.
Okay, so I flipped this idea in my mind, and I think it is relevant to keep this, but I would change the heading, making your design files accessible to dot dot dot. Because then you're saying, there's purpose behind organizing things, and then you can mention things maybe like about having a website, just one single website where all the project files are. Um,
Building your design repository.
There we go. Because that feels a little bit, because the way it's like organizing and sharing your design files, it's like you're keeping it for you, but it's you're making it accessible to everyone. So making your design files accessible, I don't know, something like that.
Okay, I think that's I think we kind of know what we want this to be, but and then in
Yeah.
the PR we can figure out exactly what terminology, and maybe we can prompt AI again to see if it can come up with something good. Give it a second chance. Um,
Can I add something?
go for it.
Yeah, I'm thinking in the lines of product also. So when you're sharing stuff open source, especially like Figma files, will it like be helpful if we add something like, okay, how to name your layers, how to name your frames, how to name your sections, so it's easy for whoever that's going to work on that file to let it be pretty much more accessible.
Oh, that type of detailed best practices.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting. I think Figma even has some AI tools that automatically analyze your layers and rename them. Um,
Yeah, it does. It has.
That's it, right. It's interesting. Maybe there are some standards or so, and maybe this can be automated even. I think sometimes it's also, let's say, your developers work with Bootstrap or Tailwind, and they want you to use naming conventions from some framework or so that they use. I know in the Bitcoin Core app they asked us to rename some of the grayscale colors to start with 0 instead of a 1 because they always start counting with 0. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it can be helpful with the understanding that I think some teams might just have their own.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Naming things is one of the most debated topics, right? Especially in Bitcoin. Um, okay, do we want to go to the next one?
Sure.
All right,
Sure.
I'll take that one. Explaining your design decisions. When you share your designs, it's important to explain your thinking. This helps others understand your choices and make it easier for the design to be used correctly. Here's what to include. The problem. Explain what issue you are trying to solve with your design. The process. Share how you came up with the design, including any research you did. Key decisions. Talk about important choices you made, like why you picked certain colors or layouts. How to use it. Give clear instructions on how your design should be used. Technical details. Include any specific information needed to use the design, like the exact color codes. Accessibility. Explain how your design works for people with different abilities. And future ideas. If you have thoughts on how the design could be improved later, share those as well. Write all this in a way that's easy for others to find and update. A simple text file in the project's main folder can work well. Yeah, I don't know about that simple text file. I think it really depends, because you might like share design for a specific feature and then it might change or so. Maybe we can almost leave that last sentence out. I would add the status of the design, because you don't want people to think something's final when you're still just exploring. I would also explain what issues you're not trying to, like what things not to look at specifically, because sometimes people also get sidetracked.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I always love including a video about the design, because um, things are asynchronous. And if I create a short 3-minute, 5-minute video, which I upload to YouTube, I can guide people visually through it, and I can tell a story at the same time, which allows me to make it more come to life. And afterwards, people can still explore the design on their own. And some people prefer watching a video rather than looking through some complex 20-screen Figma page or so. So interesting to see accessibility in here.
I would also add in research as well and explain how research has contributed to the design decisions.
Yeah, I think that's part of number 2, including any research you did.
Oh, right. I would almost, yeah, I didn't hear that part. I was taking notes. So I wasn't looking at the, yeah,
So I
yeah,
think the most powerful thing we can do here is include a bunch of examples.
yeah,
Um,
yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
hey, Toby, thanks for joining. We're halfway down the page. Just read about explaining design decisions, and now we're going to hop onto the next one. Or any other thoughts on this chapter?
Mm-mm.
I mean, it's okay. I guess at the top now we had several paragraphs about the stuff that you create, then how to organize it, then how to prepare the sharing and the presentation to others. And now
Mm-hmm.
we're going to go, once you've actually done that, how you deal with whatever comes back from your community or collaborators.
Yeah.
Anyone would like to read that one?
I'm happy to read it. Or Toby, would you like to read it? You just jumped in. I'm just volunteering you. If you don't
Yeah,
want to, I'm happy to.
sure, sure. I'm good. Well, okay, I'm going to read it. But I need what paragraph are we on?
Dealing with feedback.
Dealing with feedback. Dealing with feedback. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to rearrange myself.
We're good.
Um, Dealing with feedback. Sorry. Um, Christoph, please could you send me the link? I'm really lost there.
Okay, no worries. It is here.
Yep, thank you. Feedback. Okay, yeah. Dealing with feedback. After you share your designs, people will likely have opinions and suggestions. This is a normal and helpful part of open source design. Try to keep an open mind where you get feedback. Remember, people are trying to make the project better, not criticize you personally. Be ready to explain your choices, but also willing to change your design if someone has a good reason. Make changes to your design based on feedback you get. Keep track of what you change and why. This helps everyone understand how the design evolved. If people disagree about your design, try to get everyone talking to find a solution. Sometimes showing a few different options can help people decide what works best. Could you hear me? I don't
Yep.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, am I supposed to? I'm guessing I'm to speak on what I think about it, right?
Yep.
That would be great.
Okay, so I think it's pretty. I think it actually, this is a problem that I think a lot of open source contributors designers face, and sometimes sometimes accepting feedback for a lot of people can be, people just need to just realize it's not that personal. So I think that's what it's about, right? And just I think it hits the nail on the head. And I think concerning make the partners keep track of what you change and why. I think if we could like have maybe like if you could have like in brackets saying version control or something like that, then maybe I don't know if you could find a way to explain what version control is. That is basically keeping track of each iteration or a version of something you build. I think that might help to, to explain that better. I don't know if you got what I was saying.
Yep, nope, totally got it. That was great. Just taking some notes a bit too. I think there was something else I wanted to add. I think it can be helpful to try to limit the number of iterations at the beginning
Mm.
with GitHub with pull requests in the Bitcoin design guide. I think we try to think about three categories or steps. The first one is people people read generally through it and say like this is generally a good page, this is generally good content, generally the structure is good, I feel like it addresses the big picture, right? You don't worry about typos or some details. There might
Mhm.
even be like an image missing or something, like that's fine, but you just generally want to approve of the direction. And that gives the person who works on the design or the content, gives them the confidence that they're not going to have to redo everything at some point. uh, so and then they can start continue, fleshing this individual pieces out a bit further. And then there's the second round where you then again try to narrow it down a bit. You still don't really worry about typos or maybe some minor technical thing. um, and then in the final review, that's when you try to get all the little bit details. Like you don't give feedback anymore in the general structure, the content reads well, everything's taken care of. You just want to make sure like the links are not broken and these types of things. So I think if you, as a designer, if you help lay out kind of your expectations that way, then it helps people focus their feedback as well.
Um, I
And
yeah,
you
I
don't end up with like 100 iterations ideally.
something else that I think could also be added there is um, this is with dealing with feedback. So maybe my suggestion goes more in the sharing design files, but um, ask for what type of feedback you are looking for. Um, I think would also be helpful, but maybe that's more for the organizing and sharing your design files. I'm not sure. It's kind of, yeah, paper side.
Yeah, adding to that point, I did have a question. Do we have a specific section that covers this? Like, how do you approach taking feedback and what do you do with that feedback, like before in the guide, or is this one of the first times we are having it? Because I think it's concise, but it's too concise for a person who is new to this open source design concept, and then how to take feedback and dealing with feedback. That's a like it's a completely different thing. So
Yeah.
people should learn that.
Okay. Okay, we have three, on the homepage, we have this content view.
Hmm.
And in chapter 5, design process, we have gathering and incorporating feedback.
Yeah.
Then here we have dealing with feedback. And then in chapter 8, improving user experience, we have gathering and acting on feedback. So we should try to read all of those three
Yeah.
together and see if there should be just one or if it makes sense to cover it from different angles.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Are you comfortable getting feedback today?
What?
Are you? I mean, are you comfortable getting feedback on your design work, or is it still something that's sensitive? I'm very comfortable
Yes,
with it.
I am. Yeah, uh, I'm like as much as you can, whatever you think.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
quietly still curse the
Mhm.
people, but then get over it and deal with it.
that kind of depends if you're not able to explain your process. I feel like when I'm not able to explain my process and someone gives a feedback and then I have to re-explain that this is what I did, and then they're like, oh, now it makes sense. Then it's like, so explaining, yeah, the documentation part of explaining your design decisions is like super important. And one more thing, just in chapter 5, the design process, gathering and incorporating feedback, it is not there. It just says that you should use design proposals, community calls. Like it gives you ideas what you should be gathering feedback on and stuff, but no concrete tips on what you're doing with that feedback. Like,
Oh, it's more top level.
yes. So there's not, basically, there's not enough info on what you're doing and how you're doing with feedback.
Yeah, I think we're, you know, just knowing from the design guide too, this always happens when you have a lot of pages that you touch on topics in different ways in different places. We might just need to cross link and we'll be okay. But you can never nail that perfectly the first time. Okay, wrapping up. Um, Mr. Y, we're recording here. I'm not sure if you want to share your.
I don't see the recording icon.
Exactly.
That's
I
what
also don't.
I
Paper Psych said. I see it, and
I
I'm the one
do
recording.
actually.
I don't.
If you look at the browser tab itself, there's a red. Oh no,
Yeah,
that means. Oh no, that means
it
something else.
just means that I'm sharing the video. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who this guy is, Yashraj. I think I typed the wrong name. So anyway, I'm gonna turn my camera off.
Yeah. Okay, let me know later if you want me to cut this out. Totally fine. Okay, but let's call wrapping up. We have about 7 minutes left here. I'll just read it real quick.
Let's go.
Contributing designs to open source is a great way to improve software used by all people all over the world. This is super generic. It's not helpful. By creating good mockups, prototypes, and graphics, keeping your files organized, explaining your decisions, and working well with feedback, you can make a real difference. Remember, open source design is all about working together. Your work builds on what others have done, and future designers will build on your work too. Enjoy being part of this creative community, learn from others, and don't be afraid to try new design ideas. Your unique skills as a designer can help make open source software better for everyone. So I think there are one or two sentences that are actually relevant to this content. The other stuff is kind of motivational fluff, I would call it. I would take those out. Um, and I would make more of a point that if you do a good job with sharing and presenting and all these things, that it is more likely that your work gets implemented and then others will build on it and it doesn't get scrapped. And you're going to have a much easier time as well. You're not going to have to fight so much because people won't be more on board. Yeah, so I would remove the fluff, which we've seen in pretty much all wrap up conclusion paragraphs on all these pages. Do you share this sentiment or would you
For
do
sure.
something else?
The last paragraphs of almost every single page has been so full of fluff. It just feels so AI'd. It's like, okay, come on. Can you just try to be human?
It's just
So
trying to get you to be pumped up. You know, it's like, yeah, you can improve the lives of millions. Yeah, so it does feel like we need to add in more sensitivity to and experience from real life projects in this whole thing and make it practical in various
Yes.
places. You know, with the design tools, I was listening to the recording from last week too. Have I don't I feel like no one on the call ever used GIMP or Inkscape or maybe looked at it once.
Nope,
Nope.
We need to
I
figure out
haven't.
what tools people actually use. You know,
We're not using open source design tools per se. I feel like most of them are so.
yeah. I know Blender is
Also,
an open source tool and it's used a lot, but it also took
yeah, yeah.
15 years or so for it to get to that point. It was a huge struggle. I hope PenPod can do the same right now. But I'm also thinking about outside of this group. Maybe we go to some other open design conference or forum or so, and we just ask people what they actually use, so we have some more realistic data there.
Makes sense. So one thing before like we wrap it up, going to the top of the page, what exactly has become the purpose and of this page? Like contributing design assets, like remove the words design assets, and like what is the purpose? Just to reiterate it.
Might have to think about that.
Nice.
So I think I don't know. I think there are two things. One is organizing your process work, all the different things for design documentation, for like we constantly create assets, right? Mockups, wireframes, sketches, final things that get included or not. So just documenting that well and using formats that are if your project really wants SVGs because it's super compatible, if your project insists on open source tool like Inkscape or so, then you have to use that, right? Just being sensitive to what other people do. Like using Sketch is an awesome design tool, but it's Mac only, and that kind of excludes it from a lot of collaborations. Otherwise, I would totally use it. So being sensitive to some of that stuff. And then the second part seemed to be more in, which is it's similar but different. It's preparing for feedback. So when I request feedback, I put together a separate batch of these assets that I then share. And those are not meant to be the final thing, right? Those are not discovery. They're not final production files. They're like presentation files. It could be a video, maybe a prototype, maybe it's something else, or maybe you produce files for research. So I think maybe differentiating that based on what you're trying to do, and then how to create those best and how to organize them later on. Maybe that's so all these artifacts are kind of organized and usable and don't get lost.
I feel like maybe also a nice visual, and that's maybe not even now in this iteration, but visuals for all of the pages. And this
Yeah.
page will specifically have a visual about these steps, because before you start contributing, you're doing all of these things, you're organizing, you're creating. It seems very logical, but maybe just having a super simple diagram that looks fun just adds to the
I
experience of
mean,
reading the page.
yeah, and adding as many examples and stuff from the community itself can help a lot. Like a lot of
Mhm.
the stuff is like I read it, but I'm like, I don't know. How do I do that? If there is a video example of that, someone created a loom like that loom video. Just if it's publicly available, we can post it here, and then like okay, now I see what they're trying to say and do. That helps a lot. And that like yeah, the whole website basically needs like illustrations, diagrams, examples, and text formatting, because there's like currently the pages are not skimmable per se. Like you can't skim very easily.
Yep.
I've not checked the updated versions yet, so in that maybe we've changed that. But so far, like there's yeah, very few places that have highlights and stuff. Otherwise, it's just a huge chunk of text, which is difficult to read.
Yeah, I think that's just where we are right now. That will come, right? We first have to
Yeah,
make
yeah.
sure the actual, just like
Content.
we have these revisions, right? The first
Yeah.
we had nothing, then we have the something, the AI generated stuff. Then we're just trying to generally whip it into shape. Like we take out
Yeah.
whole sections, redo a whole page, and then we
Yeah.
add in all those little bits and pieces. And we need to have some side projects too, where someone goes around some people go around and do case studies and gather the links and gather the images, which are really fun things to do, I find, adding those visuals and making it cool. But yeah, we'll get there. And you're all welcome to chip in. If you have some good links, you can share them in the education channel, or create a pull request directly, whatever you want, right? Just share it in some way, and we'll add it in. But generally, we want to keep this page, right? Or do you want to ditch it?
Yeah, yeah,
I would keep it. It's very relevant.
Yeah. Yeah.
it is. Just the headline is not there, so we were having our own assumptions, but yeah, it's an important page.
Yeah, it's a blob right now, and we need to give it shape. Cool. Any last words, or should we wrap up?
Ready to wrap up.
Okay, then I'll turn off the recording. Thanks for anyone who actually watches these things. You're my hero.